night that should have broken Remus Lupin came and went like a storm that found no open door. Long afterward, when men spoke of fate as if it were a road already paved beneath their feet, Remus would remember the sound of rain on the cottage roof and the way his mother's hand smelled faintly of lavender and flower. He would remember his father's wand lying across the kitchen table beside an untouched cup of tea, and the old brass clock ticking with a severity that made every second feel like a verdict. He would remember that he had been 5 years old, small enough to believe that blankets could keep out monsters, but old enough to hear fear in adult voices, even when those voices tried to disguise it. Lyle Lupin had angered a creature who fed on anger. That was the truth of it, though truth had many costumes. In the ministry report, it would later be called an unfortunate altercation with a known dark creature. In Lyle's own private shame, it was the night he learned words could be sharper than curses. He had called werewolves soulless, evil, deserving of no mercy. He had said it in a room full of men who nodded too easily, and across from him, Fenrir Greyback had smiled as if he had been handed not an insult, but an invitation. Hope Lupin did not know all the words that had passed between her husband and the beast in man's skin. She knew only what fear had taught her. She knew that for 3 nights the owls had stopped coming. She knew that the dog from the next farm refused to cross their gate. She knew that once, while bringing sheets in from the line, she had seen a tall figure at the edge of the trees, and when she blinked, he was gone. That evening she made Remus sit close to the hearth while Lyle warded every window twice. Remus watched sparks rise behind the iron grate. They looked to him like tiny golden birds trying to escape. "Is the bad man coming?" he asked. Hope's face changed before she answered. Mothers had their own kind of magic, older than wands. They could make terror into tenderness if a child was looking. "No one is coming through that door," she said, stroking his hair. "Your father has seen to that." Lyle looked up from the threshold, his wand hand steady, his eyes not. "And your mother has made enough stew to frighten off an army." Remus smiled because they needed him to, and because he was still young enough to believe his smile could help. Outside, the moon climbed behind torn clouds. It was nearly full, bright and swollen, turning the wet fields silver. The cottage stood alone beyond the village road, not because the Lupins disliked neighbors, but because Lyall's work had made caution a habit. Creatures came to him in books, in bones, in rumors, in ministry cages. Some begged, some lied, some howled. He had thought knowledge made him safe. That night, he understood that knowledge only sharpened the outline of danger. At 9:30, the wards trembled. It was not a crash. It was worse than a crash. A crash would have been honest. This was a soft shiver through the walls, a breath against the glass, a finger drawn slowly over the skin of the house. Hope's hand tightened on Remus's shoulder. Lyle rose. "Take him upstairs," he said. The cottage went very still. Hope lifted Remus, though he was growing heavy for her, and carried him toward the narrow staircase. He looked over her shoulder and saw his father standing in the center of the room, wand lowered, listening. The flames sank blue. The clock stopped. Then came the voice from outside. Lyle the tight. It did not shout. It did not need to. Remus felt his mother's heart beating against him. "Lyle," the voice called again, almost amused. "I only want to speak." Lyall's jaw clenched. "Go upstairs, Hope." She obeyed then, not because she wished to, but because every old instinct in her had turned toward the child in her arms. Remus clung to her nightdress. The stairs creaked beneath them. Behind them, Lyle moved toward the door. On the landing, Hope whispered words Remus did not understand. The air thickened. The bedroom opened, warm and dim, with his wooden horse on the sill and a quilt folded at the foot of the bed. She placed him down and knelt before him. "You must be very quiet," she said. "Is Daddy going outside?" "No." But the man said, "Your father is cleverer than the man." It was the first lie Remus ever saw hurt her. Downstairs, Lyle did not open the door. Later, he would understand that this saved his son's life. He did not open it because some instinct older and better than pride finally rose in him. He had spent years speaking of dark creatures as if they were problems arranged for his intellect. But now his child slept beneath the same roof as his words, and he understood that arrogance was not courage. "You are not welcome here," Lyle said. A laugh came from beyond the wood. "No? I thought we might talk about souls." Hope covered Remus's ears, but not quickly enough. "Or perhaps I will speak to the boy." The wards trembled again, harder this time. A window cracked downstairs. Hope stood so quickly that her knee struck the bed frame. She pulled Remus toward the wardrobe, opened it, and pushed aside hanging coats. "Inside," she whispered. "I don't want to." "I know, darling. Inside." He crawled among wool and cedar. She pressed a kiss to his forehead, then shut him in darkness. The world narrowed to slivers. A slice of moonlight under the wardrobe door, the muffled thunder of his own breath, his mother's footsteps, and below them his father's voice rising at last in fury. There were spells then, but Remus did not see them. He saw only flashes through the keyhole, white and blue and gold, making the shadows leap like frightened animals. The cottage shook. Something heavy struck the wall. Hope cried out, not in pain but warning. Then the roof groaned. Fenrir Greyback had not come alone. The thing that saved them was not Lyell's brilliance, nor the ministry's vigilance, nor the strength of the wards he had woven with a scholar's confidence. It was Mrs. Howell from the next farm, who had never liked Lyell much, had always thought him too stiff and clever by half, but who had seen a shape pass her lower field at moonrise, and had sent her Patronus to the village watch, because old country blood knew old country danger. 3 wizards arrived in the rain just as Greyback tore through the outer charm. Remus never saw the battle clearly. In later dreams, it would become a confusion of sound, boots in mud, men shouting, glass falling inward, his mother calling his name, his father saying a spell with such force that the walls seemed to answer him. A monstrous shadow crossed the bedroom door. Something sniffed. Remus stopped breathing. The wardrobe door opened. Fenrir stood there, not fully man and not yet the beast he would become when moonlight finished its work. His face was long and gray, his eyes bright with a hunger that was colder than hunger. He looked down at the child hidden among coats, and for one suspended second, Remus stared back. The werewolf smiled. Then Lupin threw himself between them. The curse that left Lyell's wand did not kill Fenrir. It did not even wound him as deeply as Lyell wished, but it drove him backward through the bedroom door, and in that breath of time Hope dragged Remus from the wardrobe and pressed him beneath her body as the room filled with ministry fire. Greyback fled before moonrise completed him. That was how the reports phrased it. Fled, as if he had been routed, defeated, diminished. Lyell knew better. Greyback had chosen to leave. There were too many wands, too much light, too little time. He vanished into the wet black of the moor, his laughter carrying behind him, promising that unfinished cruelties could wait. When dawn came, the cottage smelled of smoke and wet earth. The front door hung crooked. The kitchen window was gone. Lyell sat on the stairs with blood dried at his temple, staring at his son's small hands as if he expected them to change. But Remus was only Remus. No bite marked him. No curse entered his blood. The moon set beyond the hills, indifferent and defeated. Hope wept when the healer confirmed it. She held Remus so tightly that he wriggled and complained, and then she laughed through her tears, which frightened him almost more than the night had. Lyell did not laugh. He took the healer aside and asked the same question 3 different ways. "Are you certain?" "Yes." "No contamination?" "No." "No trace of infection?" "None. Your boy is unharmed." Unharmed. The word should have healed him. Instead, it became the beginning of Lyell Lupin's long penance. For years after, he could not hear a wolf howl without standing. He could not see Remus asleep in moonlight without closing the curtains. He could not pass judgment easily anymore. Not upon beasts, not upon men, not upon anything that wore suffering like a second skin. The words he had once spoken followed him through the corridors of the ministry, through committee rooms and creature hearings, through every case file stamped with the dark red classification of danger. Soulless, he had said. Evil, he had said. Then, a monster had come for his son. And Lyall had looked into its eyes and seen not the absence of a soul, but the ruin of one. It changed him, though change did not come kindly. He resigned from 2 advisory boards. He wrote papers no one wished to read, arguing for distinctions among afflicted beings, for treatment over extermination where treatment was possible, for laws that did not drive the cursed into the arms of men like Greyback. His colleagues called it guilt. Some called it cowardice. A few, quietly, called it wisdom. Remus grew in the shadow of that night without knowing the shape of the life he had escaped. He remembered the wardrobe, the moon, the gray face smiling down at him. But memory in a child is soft clay. It takes the shape adults press into it. Hope told him he had been brave. Lyall told him nothing unless asked. At 7, Remus began reading from his father's shelves and discovered that monsters were cataloged more carefully than people. At 8, he asked why werewolves were given 3 paragraphs in one book and 30 pages in another. At 9, he found the old ministry report and read his own name in it. Intended victim, Remus John Lupin. He carried the parchment to his father's study. Was he going to kill me? Remus asked. Lyall looked older than he had that morning. He took off his spectacles and folded the report with hands that had once dueled a predator in a burning room. No, he said softly. Worse, perhaps. He meant to make you suffer for something I said. Remus frowned. That isn't fair. No. Why did you say it? The question was simple. That made it merciless. Lyall looked toward the window. Beyond it, the garden was green with spring rain, and Hope was hanging linen in the sun. For a moment he seemed to be listening to another night, another voice calling his name from the dark. Because I was proud, he said, and frightened. And I mistook those things for being right. Nah, empty. Remus considered this with the solemnity of a child who had not yet learned to protect adults from truth. Were you wrong? Yes. About all of them. Lyall drew a breath. About speaking as if pain makes someone less human. That answer stayed with Remus longer than the report did. When his Hogwarts letter arrived, it came on a mild July morning, carried by a barn owl with one ear tuft bent sideways. Hope cried again, but this time quietly, joyfully, into the dish towel. Lyall read the letter twice. Remus took it from him and read it 3 times more, his face bright with a hunger that had nothing monstrous in it. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. For most children, the words promised wonder. For Remus, they promised proof. Proof that the shadow at the wardrobe door had not followed him into every room. Proof that he was not merely the boy who had almost been taken. Proof that a life could be more than a narrow escape. Lyall walked him to the station on the 1st of September. Hope kissed him until he complained. The platform roared with steam and voices. Trunks banging, owls hooting, parents fussing, children pretending not to be afraid. Remus stood thin and neatly dressed, his second-hand robes brushed until they looked almost new. His father knelt before him, heedless of the crowd. You need not be the cleverest boy there, Lyall said. Remus smiled. But I might be. Hope laughed. Lyall's mouth twitched. You need not be the bravest either. I know. Good. Lyall hesitated. But be kind where cleverness would be easier. Remus did not fully understand, but he nodded because his father's eyes had gone serious. Then the whistle blew. The train took him north through fields and towns and rain-washed hills. Remus found an empty compartment near the middle and sat with a book open on his knees, though he read the same sentence 6 times without absorbing it. He was wondering what sort of boy he would become when there was no one around who knew what had nearly happened to him. At the next stop, the compartment door slid open and a boy with untidy black hair leaned in as if he owned the train. Anyone sitting here? No, Remus said. Brilliant. The boy dragged in his trunk with no grace at all. I'm James Potter. Remus Lupin. James shook his hand with theatrical seriousness, then immediately dropped into the opposite seat and began talking about Quidditch, broomsticks, his parents, the stupidity of trunks, and whether Hogwarts ghosts could be challenged to races. Remus, who had spent most of his life around careful adults, watched him with fascination. James did not seem to have an inside voice. He did not seem to have an inside anything. Everything he felt came blazing out of him. Before Remus could decide whether he liked him, another boy appeared in the doorway. This one was beautiful in the careless way of old portraits. Gray eyes, dark hair, fine bones, expensive robes worn like a challenge. He looked into the compartment, looked at James, looked at Remus, then smiled as if he had found trouble and approved of its furniture. "Is this one taken?" James spread his arms. "By the future heroes of Hogwarts, yes." The boy stepped in. "Then I'd better sit here before standards collapse entirely. I'm James." Sirius Black. Something flickered in James' face. Even Remus knew the name Black. Everyone did. It hung in old wizarding families like smoke in velvet rooms. James only grinned wider. "You don't look very serious." Sirius stared at him for half a second, then laughed. The sound changed the compartment. By the time Peter Pettigrew stumbled in 20 minutes later, round-faced and anxious and apologizing for existing too loudly, James had already bought half the trolley. Sirius had insulted 3 ancient pure-blood customs, and Remus had laughed more than he intended. Peter hovered until James waved him in. "Sit down, then. We're discussing whether ghosts can be bribed." Peter blinked. "Can they?" "Lupin says no," Sirius said. "I said it depends what they still want." James pointed at Remus as if presenting evidence before a court. "That is why he's the clever one." Remus flushed. No one had ever assigned him a place so quickly or so generously. By dusk, the 4 boys had shared sweets, rumors, and increasingly ridiculous theories about sorting. James wanted Gryffindor with the confidence of someone who believed the world would arrange itself accordingly. Sirius claimed he might choose a house just to annoy his mother. Peter hoped aloud that the hat would not shout too loudly. Remus said he did not mind, which was not entirely true. He minded more than he expected when the candles of the Great Hall floated overhead like captured stars, and the old hat sagged upon the stool, singing of courage, cunning, loyalty, and learning. He minded when name after name was called and futures were declared with a single word. "Black Sirius." The hall sharpened. The Slytherin table seemed to inhale. Sirius walked forward with his chin lifted and his hands loose at his sides. The hat fell over his eyes. A pause. Then, loud as a door breaking open. "Gryffindor!" James shouted before anyone else. The Gryffindor table erupted. At Slytherin, faces hardened into masks. Sirius removed the hat and grinned like a boy who had just set fire to a family tapestry. "Lupin! Remus!" Remus walked toward the stool with his heart hammering. The hat smelled of dust, sweat, and old thoughts. "Ah," said a voice in his ear. "Here's an interesting one." Remus went still. Not merely clever, not merely brave. Marked by fear, but not owned by it. A boy who listens before he speaks. A boy who sees cages even when they are made of words. Remus thought of his father kneeling on platform 9 3/4. Be kind where cleverness would be easier. "Yes," murmured the hat. "Better be." "Gryffindor!" James cheered again. Sirius thumped the table. Peter, sorted shortly afterward into Gryffindor with visible relief, joined them at the bench as if he had survived a trial by dragon. That night, in the tower beneath red hangings and ancient stone, Remus lay awake while the others fell asleep around him. James muttered once about quaffles. Peter snored softly. Sirius stared at the canopy above his bed for a long time before turning over. Remus watched moonlight touch the window and felt no pain answer it. He did not know that this single absence would alter the map of an age. He did not know that boys became men by the secrets they did or did not have to keep. He did not know that because Fenrir Greyback had failed to bite him, he would never need friends to become animagi for his sake, never need to vanish every month behind lies and locked doors, never learn to measure affection by what it survived. Instead, friendship came to him cleanly at first, like water from a spring. And because it came cleanly, he trusted it sooner. In another life, Remus Lupin learned early to lie. In this one, he learned early to notice who else was lying. It began as a talent for small things. He saw when Peter pretended to understand a charms essay and quietly pushed his own notes across the table. He saw when James pretended not to care that Lily Evans had called him arrogant, though his ears burned red for an hour afterward. He saw when Sirius received letters edged in black wax and laughed too loudly for the rest of the day. Remus did not pry. That was part of why people told him things. By Christmas of first year, the four boys had become a fact of Gryffindor Tower. James was the spark, Sirius the flame, Peter the smoke that followed wherever warmth gathered, and Remus, to everyone's surprise including his own, became the hand that shaped the fire before it burned down the curtains. He did not stop their mischief. He refined it. "No," he said one evening, lying on his stomach before the common room hearth while James sketched a plan to charm Professor Bin's chalk into writing rude comments behind him. "Too obvious." James looked wounded. "Too obvious? It's elegant." "Me? It's chalk. Chalk can be elegant." Sirius leaned back in his chair, boots on the table, ignoring three separate prefects glaring at him. "He has a point, Prongs." "Don't call me that yet," James said. "I'm trying it out. It makes me sound like cutlery. It makes you sound majestic. It makes me sound like something Hagrid uses to move hay." Remus dipped his quill. "If you want to improve history of magic, charm the dates in everyone's notes to rearrange themselves into limericks after the lesson. No one can blame the chalk." James stared. Sirius lowered his boots. Peter whispered, "That's brilliant." Remus continued writing, but his mouth curved. He was not the sickly boy some teachers might have expected from his slight build and quiet manners. Without the monthly transformations that had stolen his strength in another thread of time, he grew steadier. Not broad like James, nor reckless in the bones like Sirius, but wiry and quick, with an endurance that surprised opponents in the dueling club and friends in snowball fights. He woke early. He read late. He learned the castle's moods, which staircases shifted out of spite, which portraits gossiped, which suits of armor hummed old battle songs if addressed in Latin. By second year, James had declared their destiny. "We need to know every secret passage in the school." "We need?" Remus asked. "Yes. For academic purposes? For historical preservation?" Sirius nodded gravely. "Future generations depend on us." Peter, who had grown less timid under the shelter of louder boys, said, "And because Filch is horrible." "Also that," James agreed. So they began. Hogwarts did not yield itself easily. It was a castle built by four minds that had loved brilliance more than straight lines. Doors vanished. Corridors pretended innocence. Tapestries concealed drafts, switches, alcoves, and once memorably, a nest of doxies that chased Sirius into a fountain. Remus cataloged everything. James tested everything. Sirius dared everything. Peter remembered snacks. The first map was Remus's idea. Not the map that would one day become legend. Not yet. This was only parchment, ink, and obsession. Remus drew the third-floor corridor after midnight from memory, while James and Sirius argued over whether Mrs. Norris had a soul. "She has two," Sirius said. "One borrowed from Filch and one from something in a graveyard." Peter shivered. "Don't do it." Remus shaded a hidden stairwell. If you listened instead of insulting her, you'd know she turns left before Filch does. Her hearing is better, but he knows the drafts. James peered over his shoulder. You're terrifying. Thank you. I meant it as praise. I accepted it as praise. The map grew. It traveled from parchment to parchment, folded into books, hidden under mattresses, tucked behind loose stones. It was not magical at first. Its power lay in attention. Remus noticed. The others learned from him. Yet Hogwarts was not only secret passages and pranks. It was also blood. Sirius Black carried his family like a chain beneath his robes. At 11, he mocked it. At 12, he fought it. By 13, he bled from it, though rarely where anyone could see. The letters came less often after he sorted into Gryffindor, but when they did, they left marks deeper than ink. One November afternoon in third year, Remus found him in an unused classroom, tearing a parchment into pieces so small they looked like dirty snow. Go away, Sirius said without turning. Remus entered and shut the door. That was not a way. No, T. Sirius gave a short laugh. You're becoming as bad as James. James would have kicked the door open and challenged the letter to a duel. Remus sat on a desk, careful not to look directly at the torn pieces. My father used to think every werewolf was evil. Sirius turned then, startled by the seeming randomness. He said it publicly. Remus continued. A werewolf came after me when I was little, to punish him. Something sharpened in Sirius' face. What happened? He failed. I can see that. My father changed afterward. Not all at once, but he did. Remus looked at the dusty window. People can crawl out of the houses built for them. Sirius stared at him, and for once there was no joke ready. My house has bars, he said. Then bring tools. Sirius laughed then, but it cracked halfway through. He looked down at his hands. She says I'm a blood traitor. Your mother? She says I shamed the noble and most ancient House of Black. She says I'll come crawling back when I discover friendship with blood traitors and half-breeds and muggle lovers once saved me. Remus was silent a moment. The old word struck him differently than it would have in another life. Half-breed. A word used by people who wanted human beings sorted into purity and contamination. A word his father had once nearly placed into law. Will you? Remus asked. Why? Why? Come crawling back. Sirius' eyes flashed. No. Then she is wrong. It was too simple to be comfort, and perhaps that was why Sirius accepted it. By fourth year, the boys had become famous enough to irritate half the staff, and beloved enough that the other half tried not to smile while assigning detentions. Professor McGonagall developed the particular expression she used only for them. Lips thin, nostrils sharp, eyes secretly alive with reluctant admiration. Professor Slughorn attempted to collect James for the Slug Club, Sirius for his name, Remus for his marks, and Peter because he happened to be standing nearby. James lasted one dinner before declaring the crystal pineapple suspicious. Sirius insulted his cousin's fiancée and was not invited again. Remus continued to attend occasionally, not because he enjoyed the company, but because information moved through Slughorn's parties like wine through a goblet. There he first noticed Severus Snape properly. He knew Snape already, of course. Everyone in their year knew everyone by then, and Snape was difficult not to notice. Thin, sallow, intense, with hair falling like curtains around eyes that seemed always to be measuring debts. James disliked him instinctively. Sirius disliked him by choice. Peter disliked him because James and Sirius did. Remus, inconveniently, found him interesting. Snape knew more curses than a boy should. He also knew more healing countercharms than anyone realized. He watched pure-blood politics with a hunger that did not seem born of belief so much as exclusion. He stood near Slytherins who despised his poverty and Gryffindors who mocked his ambition, and he sharpened himself in the space between contempt and desire. Lily Evans spoke to him still then. Not as often, not as easily, but still. Remus saw it in the library, Lily leaning across a table. Red hair bright against winter light, her voice low and urgent. Snape looking away with the expression of someone who wanted rescue but resented the hand. "You're staring," James muttered. Remus turned a page. "Observing. You observe Evans a lot." "I observe Snape." James recoiled. "Why?" "Because you keep hexing him. He exists provocatively.